So it's great to be here, and good morning. It's great to be here, and I think it's gonna. I'm very honored to be here. Second time at USP actually. First time was yesterday, and I was talking to graduate students. It was fun because we discussed a lot about human rights issues and things specifically when it's what's going on right now under the Trump administration, the whole things. And I know it's a lot, huh? But today I'm very honored to be here and to talk about a subject that I don't like to say that I'm an expert on that because I do a lot of work on human rights and things, but it's interesting that I'd like to discuss specifically Egypt, where it's home, where this is I born and grew up before moving to the United States, but also I'm very grateful to Professor Faculdade for inviting me to give this remarks. It's really amazing to be here, and I really enjoy the hospital. How historic it is. I think this is because always I have been hearing about USP all the time, which I know that it's Harvard here. So I'm glad that I made it to USP for twice now. And I want to tell you that I've been to Hebron for the campus. There is a campus in Hebron, but I did that I think five years ago. Let me get you some remarks on how the situation on the BRICS specifically in Egypt, because Egypt for the last 5 to 7 years actually, it also joined the Union for BRICS, which was actually also made Donald Trump in this administration again not acting in a good shape for Egypt as well. However, Egypt with the United States should, considered to be a good ally till the end of the Biden administration, but now is having again Donald Trump in office. It's kind of challenging at this point, and you'll see it every single day. With the whole trade wars that he started to do with a lot of countries across the globe, within Europeans. Recently, unfortunately, the 50% tariff here with Brazil, based on the decision of the trial of the former president, which I do not understand how the president of the United States is interfering in a trial of a former president of another country. This is totally, we never had such a thing before, and it's just annoying and hard to see or to get something like this kind of intervention in the internal politics of other countries. So, So the remarks we're going to explore BRICS from multiple angles when it comes specifically to Egypt, historically, legally, economically, and geopolitically. Before I wanted to turn on to the Egypt-specific motivations and challenges when it comes to that. So I just do not like to give you just a description of what's going on, but I think it's also interesting to give you some critical analysis so that maybe we may better understand what BRICS means for Egypt and for the international legal and economic order. So before I talk about Egypt specifically, I want to give you an idea about the BRICS in general in the Middle East, and how, because there are also countries in the Middle East like Saudi Arabia is a part of that right now. So it's important to know that BRICS is expanding its presence in the Middle East and North Africa. Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Iran actually is also one of the countries that joined the Union recently, alongside with Egypt. And that's mostly we're going to reflect and give you an idea about how there is a kind of a great alignment within these countries, which will make situation for them a kind of difficult when they deal now with the United States, because the President of the United States is not happy with them, and he proposes 2 things at this moment for countries in the Middle East. I think he backed off a little bit when it comes to UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and stuff after his last visit early April, when he was saying that he's interested in those countries, but he also said that I want to punish countries that they would be joining BRICS, and he wanted to not only just with tariffs, but he's also was talking about immigration restrictions in general to those countries in terms of visas, and things like that. He's always do, and as he always threaten people with things. So, for example, for oil producers like Saudi Arabia or United Arab Emirates, BRICS provides a platform to discuss energy pricing in general, what we call the de-dollarization, which mostly like using another currency, another valuable currency, or dealing in business transactions in a way without just keying on the dollar, and of course the investment flows. So for Iran, and that's that kind of alliance now for Iran is definitely important. Specifically, as you know, the relationship between the United States and Iran is not in good shape, not only legally but also economically when it comes to investment. BRICS offers a way to circumvent the Western sanctions and build alternative networks of trade and finance in general. So Egypt's accession therefore fits into a wider trend of this, specifically when it comes to a key ally in the Middle East. Egypt represents play a fundamental role when it comes to the Middle East in terms of the foreign policy in general. And as I mentioned, it's a strategic ally for the United States and the European Union, also because of the Suez Canal. Suez Canal is one of the main international watergate navigation in general. So I think that's also play a fundamental role. So Cairo, by joining BRICS, positioned itself not in isolation, but as a part of that regional wave of strategic diversification in general. When it comes to, they want to diversify their investment strategic plan, specifically within the vision of 2030 that the Middle East in general right now is playing a role of. You guys know the story of BRICS, which I am not gonna talk about that much because I'm sure that most of you that have been knowing about this. And I just heard from Paulo that the university here have almost 10 years of having an annual symposium of discussing BRICS, and this is really amazing too, because in the United States we don't discuss it at all. In the classroom, I mean, we don't. So we don't. Yeah, I mean, even in court, I mean, I don't teach international trade law, but when I talk to my friends about that, they don't touch base on it. Before I talk about Egypt specifically, I want to give you an idea about the BRICS in general in the Middle East, and how, because there are also countries in the Middle East like Saudi Arabia is a part of that right now. So it's important to note that BRICS is expanding its presence in the Middle East and North Africa. Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Iran actually is also one of the countries that joined the Union recently, alongside with Egypt. And that's mostly we're going to reflect and give you an idea about how there is a kind of a great alignment within those countries, which will make situation for them a kind of difficult when they deal now with the United States, because the President of the United States is not happy with them, and he proposes two things at this moment for countries in the Middle East. I think he backed off a little bit when it comes to UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and stuff after his last visit early April, when he was saying that he's interested in those countries, but he also said that I want to punish countries that they would be joining BRICS, and he wanted to not only just with tariffs, but he's also was talking about immigration restrictions in general to those countries in terms of visas and things like that. He's always do, and as he always threaten people with things. So, for example, for oil producers like Saudi Arabia or United Arab Emirates, BRICS provides a platform to discuss energy pricing in general, what we call the de-dollarization, which mostly using another currency, another valuable currency, or dealing in business transactions in a way without just keying on the dollar, and of course the investment flows. So for Iran, and that's the kind of alliance now for Iran that's important. Specifically, as you know, the relationship with the United States and Iran is not in good shape, not only legally but also economically when it comes to investment. BRICS offers a way to circumvent the Western sanctions and build alternative networks of trade and finance in general. So Egypt's accession, therefore, fits into a wider trend of this, specifically when it comes to a key ally in the Middle East. Egypt represents play a fundamental role when it comes to the Middle East in terms of the foreign policy in general. And as I mentioned, it's a strategic ally for the United States and the European Union, also because of the Suez Canal. Suez Canal is one of the main international watergate navigation in general. So I think that's also play a fundamental role. So Cairo, by joining BRICS, positioned itself not in isolation, but as a part of that regional wave of strategic diversification in general. When it comes to, they wanted to diversify their investment strategic plan, specifically within the vision of 2030 that the Middle East in general right now is playing a role of. You guys know the story of BRICS, which I'm not gonna talk about that much because I'm sure that most of you that have been knowing about this. And I just heard from Paulo that the university here have almost 10 years of having an annual symposium of discussing BRICS, and this is really amazing to because in the United States we don't discuss it at all in the classroom. I mean, we don't.
Seen from the outside.
Yeah, so we don't.
Care about
Yeah, I mean, even in court. I mean, I don't teach international trade law, but when I talk to my friends about that, they don't touch base on it to our students back there, and I was like saying, "Come on, guys, this is an important thing to talk about." But I mean, they don't really discuss it that much. So as other things that we sometimes do not, that we do not share ideas in a classroom back there in the United States. So the things for Egypt interest, why has Egypt as a nation with its own complex history of foreign alignments decided to join the BRICS Union? There are several motivations for that. So the first important one, specifically after the Arab Spring and after the fall down of the Mubarak administration or the Mubarak regime, that Egypt wanted to do some economic diversification, and that's important for I think for the Egyptian economy, because now Egypt faces high debt in general. Of course, inflation and the dependency actually on the International Monetary Fund loans that we got, and the Gulf aid that we got, in addition actually to the United States or the USAID, which actually one of the main things that Egypt have been relying upon since the peace treaty with Israel. I mean, so that was one of the main, I think, strategic thing since we decided to have the peace agreement with Israel in 1979. And within the agreement itself, there have been two kind of economic and military assistance to Egypt based on that. Of course, the economic assistance, which is a part of the USAID program for the development of education program and learning programs in the region, and of course, to expand the work of the non-governmental organization or civil society issues. But the other thing is also the military assistance, which mostly based on that Egypt received $1.5 billion every year from the United States for the military assistance, alongside with Israel. So Egypt and Israel are the only two countries in the region that they receive this kind of assistance, which was part of the USAID program, for the protection of national security interests, for the counter-terrorism program and sharing intelligence, everything to do with that. And the United States, there is a, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but there is a condition or a term in this kind of thing that talking about that the United States have a right at any point to suspend, not to cancel, to suspend that assistance economically or militarily if they decided to. Specifically, that happened one time, I think, probably I'm sure that you remember this, when Sisi did the coup in 2013 and President Obama decided to suspend, because there is a provision in the law in the United States that any government started to commit a military coup, or they tried to overthrow a legitimate president, which happened with the Islamist president in Egypt, that the United States had the right to suspend any kind of military or economic assistance until they figure out what was going to happen if we got a legitimate real election afterwards. And that happened to Egypt actually in 2011, but after or by the end of the Obama administration, Trump resumed office for his first term, and he resumed the assistance to Egypt again. So the membership for Cairo to be a part of this promises access to alternative sources of finance, investment, especially when it comes to the new development bank. So that's one concern. I'm not sure if you are aware, probably you are aware of this also now, that the USAID program had been suspended generally by the United States government. And this is very sad because this thing has been in implementation for a long time and throughout different administrations in the United States. And the USAID have been helping a lot of countries within the diverse program. Actually, I moved to the United States through that program. Now that program has been halted. The students or people that they wanted to go through the education program, that they will not be able to go through that program. So scholarships and the tons of research that that assistance used to provide for different countries, specifically third world countries, when it comes to the protection from diseases and climate change problems, health problems, medical access, and all these kind of things. In addition to a lot of political funds for enhancing democracy in the region and doing a lot of constitutional work in terms of voting rights, election rights, improving the system in terms of this kind of things politically. So the second concern for also Egypt is the geopolitical repositioning in the region. Now we see that Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates, Qatar are booming economically based on what their relationship with the United States and the European Union, and actually a lot of countries in Latin America. But also I think Egypt wanted to see this as a kind of a promising strategic point in terms of doing or remaking Egypt as an important economic strategic ally in the region to regain its role again, specifically not only politically but also from the economic perspective. So Egypt has long viewed itself as a bridge between Africa and the Middle East and the world in general. So the BRICS membership enhanced that identity again. I mean, Egypt used to be the cornerstone of the Middle East when it comes to the foreign policy in general in the region. And of course, Egypt is, as I mentioned before, is a strategic ally for the United States in terms of their national security interest, their economic interest in the region. They have a lot of the Suez Canal when it comes to the navigation during that. And I'm not sure if you remember that Trump had earlier, when he resumed office, he wanted the Egyptian government to make the American ships pass without paying the fees. If you remember, he tweeted about that. And it was interesting because this is not that Egypt decided to do this. There is an international agreement talking about that, and that these fees is just an international obligation that all ships around the world, when they're using the Suez Canal when they pass by, they have to be charged for that fees. It's not the Egyptian government that they do this or whatever, but it's an international agreement. So I think now being part of this, or Egypt being part of that, placing Cairo alongside with major powers like China, Russia, and also is strengthening the relationship and ties between big countries in Latin America, like Brazil, which is the biggest country in South America, economically also, and South Africa. So from another point that I think also Egypt is interested in joining that alliance is the symbolic status. Again, the membership will reshape Egypt from the investment perspective and how the key role that Egypt played fundamentally in the region. And it will give an indication to the world that Cairo is back in terms of it's not only a regional power, specifically, as I mentioned, as a strategic ally for Europeans or for Americans, but an actor have an influence in order to shape the international order, specifically within the Middle East and North African region. So that's the kind of the first part in terms of why Egypt wanted to join that alliance for BRICS. But there is also like a kind of the legal dimension, which I think that's going to be kind of interesting to talk about when it comes to the idea of sovereignty and international law. Why is this from a legal perspective? So I think when it comes to this, you will find out that BRICS is strategically important because it challenged the architecture of international law in general. And you will see that it's tried to build that thing since a long time, and a lot of international bodies have been dealing with if countries wanted to do that alliance and not only depend on the dollarization or the dollar values as the most economic power in the world, but I think BRICS promotes a different legal philosophy in that perspective. One thing is the sovereign equality and non-interference. I think the big power that they joined BRICS, including China, Russia, Brazil, other Arab countries like Saudi Arabia, Egypt, or so, it will give some kind of sovereign, and they're giving a signal or a sign to the big power that were like the United States or the European that we are back. And we are not just only depending on you economically, so we have other sources and we have other diversification that we can build upon and keen upon. So I think it emphasized the primacy of sovereignty in general, which I think it's politically and legally, that question is a bit tricky right now, specifically under the Trump administration. Simply, he doesn't care about the principle of the each nation is sovereign from interference, but he does not really consider that as a principle. He already is not believing in the rule of law in general, but the idea is that when it comes to sovereignty, last week, if you remember that Israel hit Qatar under the justification of that we wanted to attack Hamas leaders, and then it was really interesting to hear that the Secretary of State, I think 2 days ago, he was visiting Israel and he was saying, we are supporting Israel, which is fine. If you want to do that, do it. But in a way, he said that they can defend themselves even beyond Israel. And then I was like, what do you mean by this? You are the top diplomat of the United States, and you are saying, you're giving a signal to powers that they can attack countries, that sovereign countries, that they can intervene in their military. So are you advising for a military attack against? So I was like, really? And then Trump tried to pick that statement up, and when the reporter asked, I think last night when I was watching the news, and he was like saying, oh, I'm not happy. We gotta be careful when we want to hit someone. And I was like, oh my God, what are you guys doing? So it is interesting to see how the international order and the question of sovereignty when it comes to economy and when it comes to the economic power, and that the United States is trying to do this, and they feel that they have the right to hit or to intervene or to attack militarily sovereign nations. Probably you hear that yesterday or the day before, again, the United States military hit or shoot another boat in the Caribbean, in the international water, without making sure that if the people have been on this vision. There is a geopolitical dimension also for BRICS when it comes to Egypt as a key ally in the region for a lot of countries. So within the region, as I mentioned, and the globe. So In general, you will see that BRICS as an alliance strengthens Egypt's ability to maneuver between the East and the West, in general within the North African part, and of course within the key Western allies, including North America and include South America. Egypt signaled to Washington and Brussels the kind of options when it comes to say that we have to make our economic decision independently. We still want it to be a key economic ally, but we're not going to have our decision from you. We cannot do that. So this is why they wanted to diversify their options. To some extent, I'm not sure if you heard about that. Earlier in February of this year, the Trump administration also wanted Egypt to displace the Palestinians, and mostly to get the Palestinians either to Egypt or Jordan. And of course, Egypt right away refused that proposal and said that we will not be able to do that, we cannot do that. Egypt have been always, that's one of the main things that I like still about home, that Egypt have been doing a good job in terms of negotiating for a long time, for decades, to solve this question for the Palestinians. But Egypt announced that the displacement of the Palestinians was not going to be a proposal, and not going to be an acceptable proposal. He tried to pressure, and he used BRICS and other proposals in terms of punishing Egypt for the refusal of the displacement itself. And he was saying, okay, so if you do not like to get the Palestinians, we will have a lot of restrictions in terms of visas, so we have a lot of restrictions in terms of the people that they work in the United States will be tightened their security. If you have security clearance, of course, if you work within the government or so, they will gonna revoke your security clearance and this kind of thing. So he tried to threaten with a lot of things to the Egyptian government. Now he kind of backed off a little bit. We're not sure what he was gonna do, because he's busy with what's going on domestically, horribly things when it comes to Charlie Kirk and all whatever. Because the country is not stable at this moment at all, politically. It's not stable, it's totally deeply polarized. So he is not even able to manage that at this moment. And he's failing in fulfilling his promises in terms of he said that he was not gonna have inflation. Inflation actually, I'm not sure if you heard 10 days ago, a report by the New York Times report, I remember I read it, it's getting a little bit high. The employment is getting in a bad shape. I think by the end of the Biden administration, Biden gave him a good economy. He didn't like to, and this is what happened when he said, oh, my economy was good in the first term. No, your economy wasn't that good, but Obama's economy, he gave you a good economy. Specifically for the first 2 years when he got in office, till 2018, then COVID hits, and he wasn't able to do anything. He downplayed the pandemic. So he put Americans in a very bad decision. Even he wasn't, as a former president here, he wasn't even believing in vaccines and things. And he was encouraging Americans not to be vaccinated, not to wear masks. And so it was a kind of, he really downplayed the pandemic or the virus. Remember that, and it was hard. And that's one of the main things that he wasn't able to secure his second term right away in 2020. And he still believes at this moment that the election was rigged, and he won the election, and Biden got there by fraud election, and that's of course not true. Till this moment he still say this. And I think Marco Rubio mentioned yesterday, or 2 days ago I think, after Bolsonaro's verdict, that we're going to see what we're going to do much more now. So I'm not sure what's going to happen, to be honest, but I assume they're going to probably, maybe, I'm not sure, maybe they're going to raise the tariffs again, probably to 70%, I don't know. Probably going to be immigration restrictions for politicians in Brazil, or the other Supreme Court justices. As I'm not sure if I mentioned that Minister Barroso is a good friend of mine. So I do not agree with all of what he's doing on the court, but I love him as a person. He is a great man, and we talk a lot about the case of the former president. And my concern have been always about this case was, okay, so I don't like the guy, as you guys probably don't too, the former president. But the idea is, I was just checking the idea of how legitimate was the whole trial is. Is it really 100% aligned within the law or what the law is? Or there will be a kind of a gap that Brazilians will start to lose trust in their justices and in their highest court. Because if you start to see that the court is kind of politicized, you're not going to be trusting the court anymore. And that's a big deal because we face the same thing within the United States Supreme Court right now. We have like 5 conservatives on the court and 3 liberal. The courts are going to be conservative, I think, for decades right now, specifically. Trump was lucky in his first term to appoint 3 justices on the Supreme Court. And you know, the appointment is for life. It's a lifetime appointment, meaning that there is no way that unless somebody wanted to resign or to step down or to retire or even to resign in case that there is a big deal happen. So the challenges and the criticism of BRICS, there are few challenges I wanted to bring to you. So the institutional weaknesses. BRICS is not like a kind of a big integrated bloc. It's still a kind of an alliance that a lot of members of the countries that they are part of it, they wanted to make it much more to improve, but at this moment I think it's going to be a little bit harder under the Trump administration because he was going to impose a lot of obstacles for those countries that they will be still be a part of the BRICS. You heard about what's happening in India now too. He also threatened India. Yesterday he was like joking on Twitter. He said, "Oh, I was so happy to say happy birthday to his good friend, the Prime Minister of India." He said this. Yesterday I was like checking that in my hotel and oh my God, this man is driving us crazy. But he threatened to, I think India had like probably 50% tariffs on it as well. He did this for them based on BRICS things as well. So I think Egypt may find its influence with BRICS more limited than expected to some extent in case that the investment laws or the corporate laws is not, there is a problem when it comes to the investment laws in to some extent, Egypt have a lot of bureaucracy, and probably you know what bureaucracy means. So it's interesting when a lot of my students and friends, when they are complaining in the United States about the paperwork, and I told them, you guys really do not have any idea about paperwork is. I came from a country, I know what the paperwork is. And that's I think to some extent you will see that a lot of international partners will not be able to invest in a good shape in Egypt because of the laws to some extent will not going to give you a lot of guarantees or economic guarantees. And there is no like kind of flaws within the process in terms of securing or having 100% secure investment environment in Egypt. Egypt, to some extent, there are, as I mentioned, the need to tackle internal challenges when it comes to high debt and inflation, the weak currency now because the inflation is getting terrible. And I remember under the Mubarak administration, 5 Egyptian pound was like kind of $1. Now 50 Egyptian pounds is $1. So you can see the weaknesses of the value of the currencies itself in Egypt. That's not in a good shape, and that's of course based on how the governance or the matter of the governance get into there. I'm not sure what kind of breaking news it sounds like he did a big deal now. Again, I'm not sure what crazy stuff that he did. The president, the thing is like moving on. I'm curious, but we're not going to check it right now. Without reforms, I think also the external partnerships cannot solve systemic problems. Like as I mentioned before, the corruption thing. The corruption problem in Egypt is a big deal, and it could be a big obstacle for the BRICS alliance for Egypt, and to keep their stronger legal standing within the international order. Egypt's role in shaping global governance, and this is like a final point that I wanted to bring your attention to. I think the BRICS for Egypt is still a kind of a good point to start and to move forward, but I think it shifts its position when it comes to the global governance, and it will make it a good power in terms of being sovereign in their economic decision, specifically if they do not like to rely on the United States when the United States start to threaten with, as I mentioned before, the suspension of the military assistance or the economic assistance. That BRICS alliance will put Egypt in a good point. Specifically, as I mentioned, it's the biggest in the Middle East in terms of foreign policy and in terms of shaping the economic legal order in the region. So it's a chance to play a role in shaping that role of global governance when it comes to climate negotiation, financial reform, and South-South cooperation. So, and that will, as I mentioned, it will not only position Egypt as a key economic power in the Middle East, but on the international stage. To conclude, Egypt's relationship with BRICS is a story of both promise and uncertainty, which is, I agree on that, within that argument. The promise lies within the economic diversification, as I mentioned, the geopolitical leverage, and the legal philosophy and the question of development and sovereignty based on the recent Egyptian constitution. The uncertainty lies within the BRICS internal divisions, Egypt's domestic challenge when it comes to corruption domestically, the investment laws, the corporate governance, and the balance within the Western partners, within the Europeans and within the United States. Again, Egypt and the United States have a strategic relationship since a long time ago based on their national security interest in the region, based on the stability for the United States, because, as I mentioned, Egypt was the first Arab country to sign the peace agreement with Israel, and that's a main important thing for the national security stability of the United States. So that was going to be a kind of challenge within the relationship within Egypt and the United States under this current administration that we have in Washington. For Egypt, the task is to transform this opportunity into reality. They will be able to try to test the sovereignty in terms of being independent from the United States or other key Western allies, however, strengthening good economic ties within Brazil, within China, within Russia, the other members of BRICS. So it will ensure that BRICS is not going to become just a simple but a genuine tool for growth and justice. So if Cairo succeeds, it will not only secure its own future, but I think it will contribute to a more balanced global economic stance. I will stop here, and I look forward to your question. Thank you.
Yes, this presence of Egypt is maybe another reason for the American administration to be against BRICS.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, he mentioned that actually, and I'm not sure if you guys remember that he invited actually the president of Egypt earlier in February, but I think it was interesting because he wanted to avoid the question of displacement for the Palestinians, so he backed up, and the president decided not to go. And instead, he invited the Jordanian king after, and he went to try to to cool things down first. I think they are preparing now for the Egyptian president to go to Washington again to have some negotiation and to see what's going on. I mean, the idea is going to Washington at this moment right now that you always expect something. You have to go to Washington to expect something from the government. And this has never been a principle in terms of the U.S. foreign policy. So we'll see what's going to happen when he goes there. Yeah.
Some of the leaders that went to Washington did not have a good time there.
Oh no, absolutely. I mean, there is nobody have been enjoying. There is nobody have been enjoying. I think at this time.
And also the president of South Africa.
Oh sure.
Yeah. It was very embarrassing.
Yeah, and a lot of African leaders also. He have been. I'm not sure if you guys saw. Recently, he invited 4 or 5 African leaders, and he was even joking with the president of Liberia. Yeah, when he told him that you're speaking very good English, where do you really learn? However, yeah, the English is the main language in Liberia, and he told him, oh, your English is good. And I was like, what are you talking about? I mean, you're the president of the United States, what are you doing? So it's just like concerning how I think Washington at this moment is acting when it comes to its foreign policy. So, but I think the hardest thing to imagine is why America did that again for themselves. And I'm saying this because I started to, a lot of my friends now, even they are on the Republican side, They said, oh, we regret our vote. I said, it's too late. The damage already happened. So what are we going to do now? We have to wait until he's out of office. So there is no way to do something unless something. I mean, however, even now, I don't think that even if the 25th Amendment, in case that his mental faculty or his health is not in a good shape, J.D. Vance will be worse.
Yes.
So we are saying that at least now he's okay. I mean, instead of having J.D. Vance in office, because J.D. Vance, he will be the front runner, I think, for this MAGA movement after this man leaves office in 2020. I'm not sure if this movement will continue to be strong as it is at this moment. I don't know. As you guys probably have the same question about the Bolsonaro's movement, and you guys have the election next year, I guess. So I think this year for you guys is going to give you an idea to watch around and to see what's happening in the United States, and give you a kind of an ample time to decide what you guys want to do next year. I mean, you guys, yes, please, go ahead.
Well, if you sir want to finish it, I
Sure.
do have a question.
Sure.
But my point is, in your exposition, you speak a lot about sobriety.
Yeah.
And we're facing a lot of issues regarding sobriety.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of layers about it. So I wanted to ask how Egypt see digital sobriety in terms of politics and internal politics.
I mean, that's a very good question, and I gotta tell you that Egypt try always to be, I mean, in terms of independence and sovereignty, to be sovereign in terms of politics and militarily perspective. Economically, it's not. Egypt is not dependent or not sovereign when it comes to economic decision, based on the employment rate, based on the debts, based on inflation, based on corruption. All these are factors indicate or not is not helping Egypt in terms of having its own economic decision. However, as I mentioned, Egypt always is sovereign when it comes to military action, when it comes to the political, like the relationship within Egypt and Israel. So Egypt know how to deal with this in a very robust way, based on how Egypt had been framing itself and its role strategically within the foreign policy. But economically, it's not in a good shape, as I mentioned, because always we were talking about there is a big gap when it comes, for example, to fighting corruption. There is no law, like a specific law of fighting corruption in Egypt. We have provisions in the Egyptian criminal law, the penal code, but when it comes to we don't have something like the FCPA or the French anti-corruption law, for example. We don't have that. I mean, there is a debate now in Egypt about having a new anti-corruption law to fight corruption, and specifically when it comes to international business transactions. But it's still in debate at this moment. I'm not sure, for example, if Brazil have its own anti-corruption law here to fight corruption practices, or I think that I would love to hear a little bit about that, because that could be helpful for the debate process when it comes to these proposals that is in the parliament right now. Yeah.
I think you do have.
Uh-huh.
You have the end to
Is it a
sobriety.
recent law or has been since a long
I'm not
time?
sure.
Uh-huh.
I think it's 2017.
Oh, sorry, 10. Okay, I got
Yeah,
it. Okay.
it's recent, but we do use a lot in international transactions. It is very important that, this is my point of view, all the work that I do in the office, we do put clauses regarding that. So it is important, it is a big deal thing, but I'm not sure
Okay.
if we are that much liable with that issue here in Brazil.
Uh-huh.
So we do face a lot of problems concerning corruption.
I got you. Yeah.
And especially because I have a feeling that corruption aligned with the way that the platforms works and shapes the political debate and shapes the political guidance
Right.
that we follow through. That was the reason why I was asking about Egypt, that
Sure.
the platforms still can shape it, because at the end platforms are North American as
Sure,
well, so-
absolutely. Yeah. Again, I don't think that the economic decision will be easy for Egypt to take it independently, specifically within the. They try to do good relation and strength relation now with the global South, as in Brazil and other countries in Latin America. But still, the strategic allies for Egypt, based on the Egyptian international obligation and commitments, is going to still have to be within the Europeans and the United States, because of their national security issues in the region. Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, it might be. I mean, the idea is also like it still depends on how Washington shapes its international foreign policy. So that's still a big question, and I think the leaders in the Middle East at this point still they are not. I mean, the dictators in the Gulf, they are happy to have Trump in office. I mean, you look at Qatar. I mean, they got him an aircraft like the Air Force One, and I think in the Constitution, even in the United States, the Immunus Clause prohibits of having or exchanging this big gift specifically from the President of the United States. You cannot have something like that. And when he had been asked about it, he said, "Oh, that's a gift. I'm not going to say no." No, you can't. You have to say no because the Constitution prohibits you from doing this. You know, so it's very questionable to see how the Washington government is acting at this moment, I guess. So yeah, I hope that answered your question to some extent. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Or? Yeah.
I guess I have a question, but I don't know exactly how to word it, because like I don't think I understood very well which are like the obstacles and like the difficulties in incorporating like investment law that is applied to the US and to Europe and to other countries such as the members of BRICS in general. And I guess it's something that is historically constructed. As you said, it has been, they have a pointed like interest in the region, and I guess I want to understand which mechanism BRICS could use to attract that mechanisms, those facilitating policies that you guys have with the US and Europe.
Yeah, I think a lot of obstacles that we got, which I agree with you on the idea of that. The main thing is also that we have, when it comes to this economic obstacles, specifically for Egypt, is the international taxes obligations. We have problems with the United States when it comes to taxes. I mean, taxes is a big deal in the United States, as you probably know. So it's even for American people, it's a very hard thing to understand. I mean, even for me to this moment, I still do a lot of mistakes every time when I'm filing my taxes to the American government. And you always, even with these mistakes, you have to be. And sometimes you got punished, meaning that you pay fines all the time. But the problem is with the filing and reporting and auditing, and that's will also reshaped by the anti-corruption laws, and which make Egypt in a kind of weak position, since Egypt does not have an anti-corruption law to fight corruption and to deal with kind of the unethical business conduct. As I mentioned, the case that I'm working now on with the Department of Justice, there's a lot of we call it like the code of conduct violation, which means that big American corporations in Egypt that they started to see that their public officials, not only public officials but also part of the private sector, that they are committing a lot of violations for that, and they will look at in terms of accepting gifts and bribes and kickbacks and all these kind of things. And there is a kind of also a definition of what we call securing advantage within the FCPA law, and we try to make a kind of I don't like to say comparative analysis, but a kind of analogy, actually. I think that's the right word, probably. Analogy, if securing an advantage means that you will be able to, is like accepting a bribe or not. So these are kind of questions that like face, and one of the main problems, corporate governance is another one too, because when it comes to board of directors and the commitments of board of directors and corporate executives, you will see that there's also a kind of dominance when it comes to who have the biggest share and who have this the ethical obligation to maintain the governance or the governance of the board for any corporation or company acting in there, specifically if the company or the corporation headquarters is in Cairo or generally in Egypt. So these are customs duties as well. Customs duty is a big deal, and I'm not sure if you have been hearing that the Trump administration recently have been also dealing with customs duties when it comes to some exemption. There is no exemption anymore now, but I mean, actually there are much more fees and extra fee, customs fees, even for little shipping of parcels and packages. Even, I'm not sure if that's based on what he had recently approved in Congress, the one big beautiful whatever shit that is, the big beautiful bill. He had that. I'm not sure if you know already that even visas fees, it's getting high now. I think we're going to start it from October 1st to the extra addition fees. Yeah, instead of,
for Brazil.
Yeah. For Brazil as well?
Yes.
So because the only exemption is for Europeans, I guess, because we have the waiver from getting the visas for 90 days. But even if you are on a work visa like the H-1B and processing your green card and stuff, he said that instead only of the $200, they're going to be $250 extra, which means that the American visa will almost going to cost $500, which is going to make it the highest expensive visas in the world, which means that it will hurt their economic relation. I mean, you're not going to receive people to go to the United States. People will hesitate. They mostly are going to prefer to go to Canada or to Europe or come to South America instead of going back to the United States. The ideas of also mostly for our work visas as faculty members, the university always make it renewed automatically to you, but now he is putting hurdles to that. He said that people that are on H-1B, which means that they are faculty or researchers or something associated with academic institutions, and they are sponsored by their universities to process their green card, they would not only have tightening that extra fees things, but he also said that they cannot renew automatically anymore. They have to go back to their home country and to face an immigration officer with a new interview that have been waived for a long time by the Biden administration, by the Obama administration, if you already have been studying in the United States and worked in the United States for a long time. But he reinstated an old immigration rule to say that anybody, even if you are working in the United States, that you have to go every single time when your contract expires to go back home and go to a U.S. embassy and apply for renewal again. Which means that's a terrible thing, because if you are late a little bit, you will not be able to catch up your semester for teaching the students. You have enrollment, people already paid money for enrollment in classes. So he just wanted to crack down on immigration. That's how I think. So I think there are a lot of hurdles when it comes to that, and I think I think there might be a lot of countries that might join BRICS. Actually, I think not only there. I think I'm not sure if Jordan is not a part of that till this moment. I think, right? Yeah. I think that Jordan might be happy to join, because also he threatened Jordan. Because the king of Jordan, when he talked to him about the displacement of the Palestinians, he said that we are waiting Egypt. He was like kind of diplomatic in giving. I don't understand what does that answer mean. Waiting Egypt for what? You have to make your own decision. He said, oh, we are waiting Egypt to decide on this thing. And then I think that he's trying to see if they probably may be able to join, because they wanted to have their economic independence as well. So, yeah. Other questions or thought? Yeah. And then, yeah, sure. Yeah.
In this area of visas, do you have any idea of particular schemes of visa between Brazil and Egypt, for example?
Particular schemes of
visa issuing between
Egypt and Brazil?
Facilitation of visa.
Oh no, I mean for me the Brazilian visa, I get it on one day.
No, I mean,
it's always easy for me.
Because for example, Egypt is like treats every country, or most every country, with a general visa scheme, right?
Yeah.
So the government of Egypt think of a special treatment for BRICS countries.
Yes, absolutely. I think Egypt, the new foreign minister right now in Egypt is trying to make a kind of like open relationships with countries, specifically with BRICS, which in terms, as you mentioned, for example, strengthening diplomatic relation, which means that it makes some countries that Egypt will not going to require visas anymore, which I think they wanted to apply the reciprocity principle in terms of like no visas for those countries and for the citizens of those countries. Yes, Egypt is moving forward for that in terms of the BRICS countries. In addition to this, I think they are even trying to make kind of a lot of facilitations for offering a lot of investment opportunity to these countries to invest in Egypt heavily, and they promised that they will make things in terms of investment laws, corporate governance law, strengthening anti-corruption laws and regulations to make the investors to feel safe in investing their monies in Egypt. Yes, there are a lot of kind of facilitation right now. Yeah. Not all of them are in progress, but there is a lot of kind of serious implementation of these discussions. Yeah.
Why did the Egyptian government arrest all the demonstrators that were marching in support of Palestine?
What do you mean by the administrators?
No, there was a march in Cairo
Yes.
to support of
There are marches
Palestine.
in Cairo.
And they arrested everybody.
Oh yeah, you mean yeah. I mean that's remember when I was talking about the bad profile of human rights in Egypt. I mean Egypt had a very long track of always stifling political dissent. And that's a bad thing for a big country like Egypt in the region. Because also the idea is that Egypt is different than the Gulf in a way that Egyptians are always trying to, as you mentioned, marching for key policies in the region in terms of like the protection of human rights or enhancing human rights or enhancing voting rights, election integrity, constitutional reform, all these kind of things. That's not happening in the Gulf countries because mostly they focus economically much more on. You're not going to hear any kind of discussion or debate about human rights in the Gulf, in Saudi Arabia or United Arab Emirates, and simply if you remember that the Saudi government killed a journalist, the Washington Post journalist in 2018 without any kind of accountability from the United States government. However, the Egyptian government have a long history on cracking down on politicians, on protesters, and they connect all of the crackdown always on the national security interest. They justify that. So they always use broad and vague laws. If you are even a critical of the military, because I mean, mostly the Egyptian government is a military government, as you know, since Nasser time. Till this moment, we only have 9 months, which is the Islamist government, which was like after the election in 2012, after the Islamists came into office, and then Sisi now committed the coup in 2013, and he is the current president at this moment. They use broad and vague laws specifically in terms of protecting national security. Like for example, they brought in what we call the anti-terrorism law right now, and they will always like say, okay, so if you are a critical of the government, you are against the policies and you are against the national security and you are not loyal. So they try to justify their crackdown on using the broad and the vague interpretation of the national security. National security, they use the word national unity, they use public order, vague legal words to justify how the authority can be able to crack down on politicians, on the sense, on the Palestinian issue, as you mentioned. The crackdown always coming when it comes to the Rafah crossing, because that's a part of the national security interest of Egypt as well. So the interesting part is a lot of people will realize that to some extent Egypt will always close that crossing. And to be honest with you, Egypt always faces a lot of threats from that crossing when it comes to radical Islamists. So terrorism activities can be, and Egypt have been always stepping for this, not only for itself but also for the Arab countries, because after the revolutions in Egypt, we faced one of the very severe wave of violence from domestic terrorism based on radical Islamists in the region, coming from everywhere, from Libya, from Sudan, and from the borders around. So since that time, Egypt always have been tightening and they have been very restricting, which I'm not saying it's a good thing, but I mean, this is how the government justifies the restriction in terms of but the interesting part is now, when it comes to the humanitarian assistance to the people of Gaza, there are a lot of high security alerts because they are allowing the humanitarian assistance to the people of Gaza from the Egyptian part, but it's always have been shut down from the Israeli part because, you know, it's 100 kilometers between the Egyptian border and Tel Aviv within Egypt. So the Israelis always cracking down also on the Rafah border. So they bomb, they shoot, they do. I mean, so Egypt to some extent have to close from time to time because they are afraid of the domestic terrorism things, and that's I mean, I'm not sure if it's the right word to say it's justifiable to some extent by the Egyptian government to do that. I mean, because that's a part of their national security interest that any country have the right to protect their national security interests against any kind of external threats. But at the same time, you are in front of a very humanitarian crisis with the people of Gaza. And I recently we heard about the concept of just dropping the assistance from the helicopter, which I do not think that's a good idea because I'm not sure if that will be successful to get the economic assistance or the food security. But the question for the whole thing will be why the Israeli military is just killing babies in the streets, like 5 years old, and they kill. This is one thing. The other thing is why they are trying to tighten the flow of the humanitarian assistance if the Egyptian government or the Jordanian government always decide to open the crossing, the Rafah crossing, for example, in Egypt, to allow the flow of the humanitarian assistance to the people of Gaza. But at the same time, I think actually the president of Egypt 2 days ago, after the strike on Doha, he was like saying if something happened like that in Egypt, there were going to be a kind of a very aggressive response. And I know very well that's one of the main things that Egypt is good at, which I do not like, because in terms of always they use the way to threat militarily. I mean, I'm not sure if you know that the Egyptian military is one of the strongest military in the world. This is since the 50s. Nasser always have been working on this to make the military very strong in Egypt. Because the question of sovereignty, specifically of the land for Egypt, is very important. Since after specifically after the Israeli war in 1973, and we get our land and that kind of things, I guess the question of sovereignty, and this is that means always Israel would be hesitant to hit Egypt militarily. They wanted to keep the peace agreement with Egypt since the 1979, so they don't like to damage the relationship, I think, in terms of security, and also in terms, as again, the peace treaty have been negotiated by the United States, so that's important for the stability of the U.S. national security interests in the region. So if any kind of, I think of, already the relationship right now is not in a good shape, to be honest, between Egypt and Israel. But I don't think, a lot of people right now, they think that there's going to be a kind of a military action between Egypt and I do not think, with a high percentage, that there will going to be something, there will going to be no military action between Egypt and Israel at this point. I don't think so. Yeah. What's that? Oh, sure.
Thank you
Oh, hey.
for welcoming us in your course.
It's a pleasure. It's a great pleasure to meet you
Thank
and
you
to
for
hear
having
your
me.
class.
Thank you for having me here. It's great to be here. Yeah, it's great to be here. Yeah. Good to see you. Good to see you. Thanks for having me here. I appreciate that. Thanks for having me here.
The last question? Yeah.
Yes. First of all, thank you, Professor. I'm not a specialist, but I would like just to talk about the Brazilian anti-corruption system. It's quite complex, actually. We've seen the development of a criminal economic field per se, so with many specific roles regarding anti-corruption verbs, let us say, or actions that could be criminalized, and also administrative principles that guide how the one who is employed in a public space must act or not act. And we do have, especially in a federal level, a prosecution institution that is quite active and that is actually, it seems remarkably working well, maybe not 100% of efficiency, but it has been shown that it is getting not easier but quite more difficult for anyone to actually steal from public coffers or anything like that, from the very city council point to a senate or even a ministry situation, as we have seen in those recent years. Besides that, actually, my question would be about if there is a prognostic for Egypt for an after Sisi. Because what I quite interesting, I find it very interesting, that it's a situation in which 70 plus leaders from all over the world, men basically, are in charge in this finishing episode that we have not yet seen, what will be finished actually. But if there is a prognostic about after someone who became the president after a coup, eventually, even if he loses an election or even if he dies, if there is a prognostic for Egypt in terms of democracy or in terms of the military status in a political situation for next decade, maybe.
Sure. I mean, that's a good question. I love the idea of you saying that to some extent, I always, like I've been saying, even to my friends or to my family members, and when I go back and forth, I'm not sure if we'll be able to see a civilian government in Egypt one day. That's true. I mean, we started to feel that just between the timing when Mubarak stepped down and then the Islamists came into office for 9 months. Then, of course, the Egyptians have not been happy or satisfied with what the Islamists did or the job that they have been failed at. Then they took the streets again, and then they asked the military to step in. And I think that's a big question when it comes, as you mentioned, to democracy. I think Egyptians didn't get the idea of you cannot ask the military to topple a legitimate government came by election. But since the 50s, since Nasser came into office in Egypt by a coup, they created a kind of an environment that the military is always the savior. It will give you that protection, that it will keep you always safe, even if we crack on your human rights.
Or even if there is
Absolutely.
corruption.
Absolutely.
I suppose it is difficult to fight corruption in a military-controlled state.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the military in Egypt is a state inside a state. The military, and this is interesting because it's very understandable, specifically by big powers like in the United States and the European allies. They always are sure that the only strong institution in Egypt is the military.
Almost Ottoman.
Yes. It's since the Ottoman Empire, for sure, when Egypt was a part of the Ottoman Empire historically. But I think when Nasser came, even after, because Egypt had been under colonialism for a while when Egypt was a monarchy, under King Farouk and King Fuad, and then Egypt was it was under colonialism by the British and the French. And then Nasser came in within the military, secretly to topple the king and decide that Egypt will always be based on a military ruling. Till this moment, that's the thing. But it's not like the classic military things. It's what we call, I have a very good friend of mine at Cornell. His name is Kevin Claremont, one of the leading faculty in procedural law. He always likes saying it's a friendly dictatorship. Yes, he called Egypt as a friendly. It's they always criticize Egypt in terms of how they are bad in human rights profile, cracking down on journalists and something like that. But they always said that Egypt is a very good, friendly dictators to us in the United States. And this is why the United States always have been protecting dictators in Egypt. I mean, they have been protecting Mubarak for 30 years because their interest is important for them by keeping a dictator in office. They know that they are dictators and they want to have these dictators in office for the protection of their national security. They don't care about really seeing democracy in Egypt or Tunisia, as they always say on the surface. No, they don't give a damn about it. Yeah, absolutely. They don't care about that. They don't. Yes, and this is why, for example, I mean, when the journalists have been killed by the Saudi government, the president of that was under that Donald Trump first term administration. He told, I mean, yeah, he said that he was gonna bring people to justice. This is what he said. He didn't do anything about it. So the idea is, to what extent that the Western powers would try to pressure this government, for example, to fight corruption, to improve their human rights profile, to improve their economic decisions or whatever. But for example, it's for Israel, for example, they love seeing military dictators as being the head of state. This is why the Egyptian government and the Israeli government, since the peace agreement, are in good shape. However, the public opinion and the public domain by Egyptians about Israel is not in a good shape. Even we have a peace agreement with them. So for example, we are not banned from going to Israel, but it's the only country that the Egyptian government requires you to have a security clearance when you decide to travel, to this moment. So for us, it's very difficult to go there because the public domain is not in a good shape, even or since the peace agreement with them in 1979. So, but the Israeli look at this as always, but if we have the military, we are protected against that kind of public domain. So now, after what's going on in Gaza and the recent strike on Doha and stuff like that, they started to see how Egyptians in public, they have not been happy with the peace agreement. And if you look at what the Israeli media always share, they have been always talking about, they said, they have a peace treaty with us, but internally they hate us. This is how, and I gotta tell you, the public domain, for us as an academician, I'm so happy to see the peace agreement, and I like it. And one of the two things that I liked about the first Trump administration was the Abrahamic Accords. I like that thing. However, I know now that there is no application of that Abrahamic Accord after the international crisis that we have in Gaza. I don't think, however, there are actually threats that the Abrahamic Accord will be suspended, and because they wanted Saudi Arabia recently to be a part of that. And Saudi Arabia, after the Hamas Gaza thing, said that we're not going to be a part of that thing anymore, unless we see a Palestinian state with its capital and all this. Even Saudi Arabia, under the table, they are happy to do a lot of negotiation and trade agreements with Israel. Under the table. On the surface, they all say no. We need a two-state solution to see a state of Palestine. But for Saudi themselves, they do a lot of trade agreement, they do a lot of tourism things, and absolutely.
Exchange of
sure. Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So I think mostly you will see, because your question is really amazing, you will see a lot of big names in the United States, like scholars in terms of studying Middle East and Islamic legal studies. When they study Egypt specifically as a country, Nathan Brown or Clark Lumberty, these are big names when it comes to Egypt as a case study to study from a legal perspective, and they studied the question about how the military have been very strong since the 50s in Egypt, and he explained why Egyptians even they feel that they are cracked down by their military, they still love and vote for military leaders. And I remember even before the election that you guys had before Bolsonaro, I was here in Brazil watching the whole thing, and I talked to the media here. I mean, in one of the, I was in Porto Alegre, and there's, is it Zero Water? I talked to one of the reporters when they came to my hotel, and they interviewed me, and one of the main things that I told them, do not vote for a military government. You guys already tried to get rid of this. I mean, by the end of the 80s, 83 to 85 or so, here in Brazil. But I didn't get the idea why Brazilians voted for a military guy, because I got shocked when I got the news, I mean, when he won the election. But I was like saying, did they have the idea, the same idea that we got in the Egyptian way, as this is what I was like trying to give an advice to Brazilians, and to say, don't do that, because we're gonna be a lot. However, I don't think under Bolsonaro's time, and you guys correct me on this, I'm not sure, how the human rights profile have been received in here.
Downhill.
What?
Downhill.
Downhill?
Oh yeah. During Bolsonaro extent, we, I'm pretty sure we can say that a genocide occurred. Basically, not only, but basically on the pandemics, and specifically for our native tribes, because of the public health situation. But it was, I'm a human rights
activist,
advocate, lawyer actually, and I had to do 2 refugee situations for 2 Brazilian activists who had to get out of Brazil because of federal persecution. And they are still out there, because obviously it's not safe for them yet. But Brazil has a very complicated human rights profile as well, trying to get better at it. And Bolsonaro was a moment for a little moment of remembrance from when there was no democracy at all for human rights, especially for human rights fighters.
But the question of freedom of expression and freedom of thought or so under Bolsonaro's time is always like kind of difficult. Like, for example, if you are speaking against the government, or you have been critical of the government policies under Bolsonaro, do you think that the government can come after you? Because that's the scenario in the Middle East. They come after you, they threaten you with jail. Even they don't have to threaten you, they come right away after you, and
there's a disconnection from the federal government and downtown and city police structure. So what we can see is that, for example, in São Paulo state, we have a monstrous rate of police crime against black people. So
we have that in the United States.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of more focused, and we do have a Supreme Court and a judiciary system that is quite, I believe we now can say safely, that it is quite independent. So it's not that easy to get a judge decision that can stop you from talking what you want to talk, either on internet or in a public space. There's one reason why we have mass protests against Bolsonaro, even under his presidency.
As a human rights activist, if you don't mind me asking you a question, what do you think about the recent trial of the former president? How do you?
I think it was one of the fairest.
One of the first trials?
I'm sorry. I think it was one of the fairest trials, and I think was one of the most legally clear, objectively non-political trials that we have ever had
So it's not
in our Supreme Court. I mean, we can see, for instance, that there is a lobby for private health companies in our Supreme Court, in our Superior Court. But in this instance, when it comes to crack down the possibility of a military coup, the Supreme Court has been explicitly And when we, well, it's 500 pages each one of the votes, but we can see they are working quite clearly under what constitutional set tells us to do.
Sure.
So the newspaper today, Bolsonaro has just been found guilty of racism.
Of
He
racism?
Yeah,
has to
true,
pay
true.
an indemnity of
Oh,
1
I
million
saw that
reais.
in the 1 million reais?
Yes,
Oh.
it is in the newspaper today.
So racism here in Brazil is a crime?
It's a
Under
crime.
the law?
Yes, it's a
Yeah,
crime.
and you have to go to jail. It's not a crime that you can pay and not only pay, because obviously he will not go to jail because he's already.
On the way.
Yeah.
But in what sense, if I may ask, racism is a, so how, can you, I mean, so there are like specific acts that can be described as
Yeah,
racism?
Yes,
Declaration.
against black people.
Public statements.
Yeah.
or-
So for example, if there is an act, like for example, in the United States, that we have this kind of hate speech against Muslims or something like that, Muslim community. So if it's the same, so if you are against Muslim community in Brazil, you can be
Yeah.
prosecuted?
Yeah.
In fact, any type of discrimination in Brazil
Yeah.
is a crime. So like even homophobia and stuff
Oh,
like
is
that.
it? So
Yeah,
what is,
it's
Yeah.
all under the same law,
yeah,
specifically designed to combat racism. But besides it, well, the racism in Brazil is basically towards black people and our native communities, but not only. And in the development of this crime, we saw that it abarges all social groups, like in the Geneva Convention
Sure.
for
yeah.
refugees. So to stay inside a social group and to be discriminated because you are from a social group,
Right.
it's a form of racism. So it will apply to religious groups as well to skin tone
Sure.
situations as well as to homotransphobia, for instance.
What is the name of the law in Brazil? I mean, the racism law?
I think it's actually a ruling.
At the
It's
beginning,
not a-
it was law afonsaleiros, no? From the historical
Yeah.
point of view.
Yes,
The first law, it was in the 50s.
Oh.
It's called law
Alfonso Arinos was.
Oh yes, that's true.
Afonso Arinos.
Alfonso Lima?
And,
There are many laws that they are
yes,
specific.
yes, but the first one,
And actually, the last development of that law was the Supreme Court ruling in 2019 that showed that and determined that homotransphobia is also a kind of racism, so must be also be stopped from public or private situations.
and there is also a very famous case in the Brazilian Supreme Court of a book editor
Oh yeah.
who is called Elvanger.
Yeah.
And he was an editor of anti-Semitism.
Yes, he denied the
Oh, is
existence
it?
of.
Yeah.
And he was condemned on the basis of racism.
Is it? Okay. It's important, I mean, because my upcoming book is on transitional justice and systemic racism. This is what I'm asking about the racism. Yeah. So I'm getting feedbacks now. I mean, it has been in progress for 2 years now, so we're expecting that the book will come out next year. It's by Springer, so and it's a comparative analysis. So we are also doing a lot of case studies. So we decided, me and my co-author decided to add Latin America because we are questioning the United States, the Middle East, Europe. And I was like talking to him, and I was like saying, what about adding also section on Latin America? And we decided to talk about Brazil and talk about Argentina in that perspective. So I'm taking on kind of yeah. I would love to stay in touch on this.
It was that ruling from the professor mentioned
Sure.
from the Elvanger case. In that Elvanger case, it was about the same time as the discovery of the human DNA.
Right.
So it was proven, whole profile.
Sure.
It was proven that there are differences in DNA from black to white people, etc. So there was the argument that it's impossible to have a situation, a discrimination for race if there is no race difference according to DNA.
Uh-huh.
And in that ruling, they decided that it is not, racism does not, it's not linked to the DNA situation, but it's linked to pertaining on a social group that is considered vulnerable or minorized, something like that. As well as women rights, for instance.
I would love to stay in touch on this and continue this conversation if you don't mind. And Professor, if you have any literature on the racism thing, I'll be more than happy if we can exchange emails, and I would love to stay in touch with this if you don't mind. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having me. I hope
Thank
that you
you.
enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Thank you.